Hello, you're watching the Ruslan Belov channel. Trump announced that on Monday the 14th, he will make a very important statement regarding Russia. What do you think it will be? The fighting continues, and we continue to analyze the situation on the front. Let's move to the map. We can even say that it's becoming an operational encirclement, as the village is surrounded from the west, north, and south. The only way to supply our garrison in Kondratovka is from the east. But as you can see, the distance between Ukrainian positions to the south and west is less than 2 kilometers, and of course, this entire area is under fire. Over the past 2 days, the situation hasn't gotten better, but it hasn't worsened either. Russian troops are holding on. The Ukrainian armed forces are entrenched in the northern part of Kondratovka and are now trying to push toward the center in waves, but so far, all their attacks have been repelled. They haven't managed to advance even a millimeter. If you look at another map, specifically the Ukrainian one, you can see that aviation is actively striking the road where the Ukrainian forces are trying to bring in reinforcements. Overall, the situation remains consistently difficult. That's my conclusion. And as I said earlier, and I'll say it again, it may become necessary to withdraw from Kondratovka. Personally, if that happens, I won't be surprised, because it would be a logical move to preserve the lives of Russian soldiers. They can't remain indefinitely in this semi-encirclement. However, it's still possible that a counterattack could push the Ukrainians back, allowing us to retain control over the village. We'll keep watching. As for Sumy region, fierce battles continue in Yunukovka. So far, it has not been possible to fully push the Ukrainian forces out of the southern part of the village. The same goes for Vorozhba. It's proving difficult to drive them out completely or secure this pocket. However, by advancing and capturing the village of Besalovka, Russian forces have finally improved the situation for the garrison in Tyotkino. Previously, this village was used by the Ukrainian forces as a staging point to stockpile resources and manpower. But now it's under Russian control. So if the Ukrainians plan to launch an attack from this side, it can only come from Iskrikivshchina. And even then, they immediately come under Russian fire because we now fully control the area from the north. So for the Russian troops there, things have finally become a bit easier. They were also in a kind of operational encirclement, like that, for 2 months. But now the pressure has eased somewhat. At the same time, it's probably obvious by now that the offensive in the Sumy region has stalled. It's a repeat of the situation from the spring of 2024, with roughly the same results. Back then, we made good progress in the north of Kharkiv region for a few weeks, captured a few hundred square kilometers, and that was it. The Ukrainians brought in reinforcements and we got bogged down. That same pattern is unfolding here, at least for now. In other words, in the second half of May and the first half of June, we were advancing actively. But then Ukrainian forces regrouped and the front line became more or less static. However, in other areas, we've seen good progress. Let's move on to Kharkiv region. Progress there is rare, but recently it's been happening more frequently. In the past 24 hours, we managed to advance in the Borova direction. This is another dead front line where the contact line may not change for months. But this time, we caught the Ukrainian forces mid-rotation and made a push of over 2 kilometers. Specifically, 2.2 kilometers. This allowed us to move toward Borivska Andriivka. But we shouldn't get too excited because, as I mentioned, this front is mostly stagnant. Right now, it's 2.5 kilometers to Borivska Andriivka, and I can't say how quickly we'll be able to cover that distance and enter the village. Yes, this latest advance has shifted the front line slightly in our favor, and we now occupy more advantageous positions. But if you look at a terrain map, it becomes clear that to the west of Borivska Andriivka, there is a high ground, held by the Ukrainian forces, while the village itself is in a low-lying area. So advancing directly along this road is a bad idea. It's like walking into a shooting gallery. We'll have to go around and take those heights first, and once we do, the village will fall on its own. But going around and capturing high ground is a tough task, so we shouldn't expect quick results. As for Borova, I won't even start. It's 9.5 kilometers from our current positions, and at the current rate of advance on this section, I don't think we'll take that settlement even by the end of the year. Things look much more optimistic on the Constantinovka front. There, too, we made some progress in the past 24 hours. And overall, despite the slowing pace, We're still recording daily advances. Remember how yesterday we discussed how the Ukrainian forces pushed us back by 400 meters in Yablonivka during a counterattack? Well, in the past 24 hours, we pushed them back by more than a kilometer north of the village. We advanced along the T-0504 highway by 1.2 kilometers toward the city of Constantinovka itself. And you know, this is the right approach, not getting bogged down in the assault on Yablonivka, but also advancing in parallel. Yablonivka is a fairly large village and a heavily fortified area, where even a 100 to 200 meter gain is hard won. So now we're also moving forward along the highway in parallel. Look at how the front line is shaped now. Can the Ukrainian forces hold their positions long in a semi-encirclement? Of course not. So in a day or two, they'll either be wiped out or retreat themselves. Either way, this area will turn red on the map. And overall, from our current positions, there are just 9 kilometers left to Constantinovka. That's, by the way, the same distance as to Borova, which we just discussed. But while I doubt we'll reach Borova by year's end, I'm more than confident that we'll get to Constantinovka, and well before the end of the year. In short, the front is moving here, and the battles for the city are getting closer and closer each day. And we continue. There's nothing new from the Pokrovsk direction for now, but we are regularly receiving updates from the southern part of Donetsk region. Notice how every day, our guys from the Vostok group are making progress there. Over the past 24 hours, they advanced another 1.7 kilometers north of Shevchenko, moving toward Voskresenka. Currently, about 2 kilometers remain before they reach the village. The area that has come under Russian control spans over 5 square kilometers. But what's more interesting here is the formation of yet another pocket, which is very close to turning into a full encirclement. And it's a sizable one, around 25 square kilometers. Personally, I'm not worried about the pace of the advance. Even if there are slowdowns or setbacks on some fronts, the Vostok group consistently compensates with their forward momentum. That's why this area will soon also turn red on the map. And just look how much territory lies ahead. How many square kilometers? In the near future, we can expect battles for Mern and Voskresenka. In fact, the fighting for Mern has already begun de facto, while the Russian army is currently approaching Voskresenka. But you can clearly see it. Our guys from the Vostok group just keep pushing forward, and that's visible day by day. Now let's move on to political news. There's a lot to cover here as well. Last night, there was another massive raid on Ukrainian rear positions. I don't recall a similar situation where, following a record-breaking strike, another massive wave of hundreds of drones hit the very next day. For the territories still under the control of the Zelensky regime, this is more bad news, writes Yuri Podolyaka. Kyiv received another wave of hundreds of drones and several dozen missiles. The primary targets were air defense systems, military production facilities, including long-range drones used by Kyiv against Russia, and ammunition depots. The Artem and Kuznia na Rybalskomu factories, where weapons were produced and repaired, were among those hit. Vasilkiv airfield in Kyiv region was also struck. According to NASA's fire map, major fires were recorded. The sky over Kyiv is filled with smoke. Air pollution has reached critical levels, especially on the city's left bank. In central and eastern Ukraine, regions such as Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhzhia, Poltava, and Kirovohrad also came under attack. Strikes targeted supply routes, transportation hubs, railway junctions, and unloading stations. Sinelnikov and Poltava were hit. Both are major distribution centers for ammunition and equipment. Western Ukraine was not spared either. Lutsk, Ternopil, and Chernivtsi were struck due to detected concentrations of rear depots, air defense workshops, and training camps. Key strikes targeted PVDs, permanent deployment sites, repair bases and logistics tied to incoming Western arms. In Lutsk, strikes hit locations housing foreign instructors and aviation facilities, as well as an arsenal located at the former missile division base. In Mykolaiv and Kherson, storage points and airfield infrastructure were targeted. European countries do not want to hand over their Patriot systems to Ukraine, stated Marco Rubio. Patriot batteries are available across many European countries, but none are willing to part with them, according to the US Secretary of State. However, in the end, The bulk of Western military aid to Ukraine hasn't been halted and continues to arrive as scheduled. I believe the bigger issue here isn't about this temporary pause. The real problem lies in the production capacity of Western defense industries, not only in the US, but in Europe as well, Rubio said. Ukraine's air defense issue is that there is simply no stock left, and what remains, no one is willing to give or sell. Russia has ramped up missile and drone production, exhausting all of Ukraine's and the West's reserves. On top of that, the war between Israel and Iran has consumed the remaining supplies that were supposed to be sent to Kyiv. Even German Chancellor Merz's statements about Germany being ready to purchase additional Patriot systems from the US to send to Ukraine won't solve the problem. Those systems would arrive only years from now, not immediately. The conclusion: Ukrainian cities will now have to live under constant threat. Any remaining Ukrainian military-industrial complex will be identified and neutralized, which will lead to a fatal outcome, since Russia currently outproduces both Europe and Ukraine in weapons manufacturing. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio discussed Ukraine, Iran, and Syria, according to the Russian Foreign Ministry. During the talks, they touched upon Ukrainian conflict resolution, as well as the situation surrounding Iran and Syria. The Foreign Ministry stated that both sides confirmed mutual interest in seeking peaceful solutions to current conflicts and in restoring Russian-American economic and humanitarian cooperation. At the meeting with Russian representatives, the US heard proposals regarding Ukraine that had not been voiced previously, Rubio said. I think it's a new and different approach. I wouldn't call it a guarantee of peace, but it's a concept we'll present to the president today. The United States will continue to engage with all sides in an effort to resolve the conflict in Ukraine, despite the current lack of progress in peace negotiations. Dmitry Peskov made a statement. Russia is waiting for signals from Kyiv indicating either a willingness or unwillingness to enter a third round of negotiations. At present, it cannot be said that the peace process on Ukraine has completely stalled. Trump's plan: accelerated deportation and asylum case closures. The Donald Trump administration is preparing strict new changes to immigration policy. The new plan includes canceling asylum applications and accelerating the deportation of hundreds of thousands of migrants. These are migrants who crossed the US border illegally and then filed for asylum. Under the new rules, their cases may be closed without review, making them subject to immediate removal. Estimates suggest the measure could affect around 250,000 people. For the first time, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services (USCIS) would be granted not only the authority to review asylum applications, but also to initiate deportation procedures. Previously, this agency did not handle enforcement. This would be a precedent. The initiative transforms USCIS from a support agency into a repressive body. Some applicants have already received denials without explanation, despite years of legal residence and employment in the U.S. The Trump administration's initiative may reduce the flow of illegal migrants, speed up case processing, and ease the burden on the system. It is seen as a step towards strengthening border control and more effective law enforcement. However, there is a risk of serious consequences. Abandoning individual case reviews could lead to the deportation of people genuinely in need of protection, undermine trust in the system, and increase social tension. Everything will depend on how strictly and fairly these measures are implemented in practice. Thank you for watching, friends. Stay tuned for updates, support the channel, and don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next episode. We'll keep you informed. Take care and all the best.